Just a few weeks ago, the focus was firmly on oil markets as renewed conflict in the Middle East threatened global energy supplies. But beneath the headlines, another market is quietly facing growing pressure. From the Strait of Hormuz and the Red Sea to growing risks in the Black Sea, fertilizer supply chains are coming under increasing strain. And while prices have remained relatively stable so far, the big question is whether that can last. I'm Johara Bota, and joining me now to discuss what's happening in the global fertilizer market is Josh Linville, VP of Fertilizer at StoneX. Welcome back, Josh.
Thank you. One of these days, we're going to have a video and we're going to talk about prices going down. Today's not
Well,
that day.
today's not that day. So the Strait of Hormuz and the Red Sea continue to dominate the headlines, rightly so. How much pressure are those disruptions putting on the global fertilizer market?
When you look at urea, that's a lot of why we're seeing prices higher. There's, of course, a little bit of demand out there, right? We saw the whole situation with the French government, which we talked about a week or two. That's brought in some buying, which has got everybody excited. So prices, of course, go higher. But now all of a sudden, the war with Iran has really picked up. It's a lot of back and forth fighting. We've seen U.S. military members killed in strikes. And that's a whole new escalation that's going to have the Trump administration and the U.S. military really hammering down and saying, okay, we're going to try and put an end to this. But at the same point, the new wrinkle of this entire thing is the Houthi rebels are now stepping up and they're making threats. And listen, this is one of those things where you can make threats and everybody kind of laughs at you and nobody pays attention. Or you can make threats and everybody says, ooh, I probably need to take this to heart and start going somewhere else. And unfortunately for the Red Sea, that's exactly what we've seen. That second scenario. We have seen vessels say, you know what? Yeah, we're not taking that risk either. We'll go around. Now, fortunately, when you look at this, the Strait of Hormuz, there's no other way around that.
Yeah.
With the Red Sea, you can get around it, but that means you have to go clear around Africa. That means more sail time. That means earlier decisions. That means more freight rates. It impacts the freight market, which ultimately gets borne in most cases by the buyer of that product. So as we're watching all this play out, it's just another wrinkle in this entire thing. Now, fortunately, it's still not a high demand, immediate, I need the product right now demand part of the season. So we're able to kind of sit back and wait and see how this plays out. But too much longer, we're going to start seeing some of these countries start stepping in. India is going to need to probably do a purchase tender unless the monsoon season stays poor. South America is on deck. They've got a little bit of time, but they're going to need to start buying product, get ready for their season, whatever that will look like. So we've got time, but it's not a lot of time.
Well, let's add another layer to that because another risk is Ukraine's attacks on Russian shipping. So fertilizer vessels haven't been targeted so far, but how significant would that be if it happened?
It would be huge. In a lot of my presentations that I've given on the fertilizer markets, and I go through all the stuff that's gone on, the one thing we've pointed out is that with all of this happening, Russia is the one thing that's really been unimpacted. Well, yeah, the war between Russia and Ukraine's continued, but their exports have continued to flow for the most part normal. If you go back to 2022, the start of all this ridiculousness around the world, a lot of the price increase that we saw back during that period was due to the fact we thought we were losing Russian exports. We had started to see, a lot of the corporations pull out, a lot of changes be made. We thought we were losing it. Now, it helped that grain prices went up at the same time, but a lot of that was because Russia was going to be lost. They weren't, and that helped to kind of slow things down. But now all of a sudden, Ukraine is starting to flex their drone strike capabilities. They're starting to flex that muscle and show nothing is off limits. And they've hit a lot of Russian vessels. Fortunately, so far, nothing fertilizer related has been hit. But imagine if we wake up tomorrow morning and the headline says something along Ukrainian drone strike, Russian vessel carrying fertilizer. This market could absolutely lose its mind. And to me, that's the last major supply lever that we can pull to have this thing start losing its mind going higher once again. That's not an expectation. I don't want anybody sitting there thinking, oh, Josh is saying this is absolutely going to happen. But this is something, it's a big enough event. It's a small probability, but a massive impact. And we have to watch it just in case that happens. If you see that in the news, you don't need to wait for somebody to come on and sit there and say, well, here's what the impact is to fertilizer. You know that's going to be a bullish event.
Yeah, it's something to prepare for. So let's go back to something we discussed a few weeks ago, I think it was. President Trump's decision to suspend duties on Moroccan phosphate. Many expected that to put pressure on prices, but they've actually remained remarkably resilient. Why is that?
Because the US, the North American marketplace for phosphate was already one of the lowest in the world.
Hmm.
And if there's nothing to block exports, well, then there's no reason for our price to already fall further than what it already was. And I don't want to sit there and say that the move was completely terrible. Listen, for the situation as it is, we need to open up every supply route we possibly can. And so I applaud the move. I appreciate the thought process, the energy, everything that they put into actually making that step. It's a great thing for the industry. But unfortunately, when you start to see some of the administration officials say, we think it's going to drop phosphate prices 22%, that's where we started to pump the brakes and say, no, we don't see that happening. And that's exactly what's happened. DAP barges are about the same price as they were 3.5 weeks ago. MAP barges are actually $20 higher than they were when that announcement was made. And it's because there's just not enough around the world.
Hmm.
And it really goes back to sulfur. Sulfur is the name of the game when it comes to phosphate. There's not enough of it around. When you look at what's lost with the Strait of Hormuz, Russia not exporting, about two-thirds of the world's tradable sulfur supply right now does not exist. There are other markets in the world who are willing and able to pay far more than phosphate manufacturers are. So production continues to drop, and everybody points out, but there's no demand. It's going to be a terrible fall. That's good, because if there was demand, you would see prices skyrocket from where they are. No demand and prices have stayed flat. So unfortunately, again, applaud the move. It's a great move. It's just not going to have the impact today that everybody thought it was going to be.
Okay, but if demand starts to recover while these supply issues remain in place, how quickly could prices move higher?
Immediately.
Okay.
I would say if we were to see right now, I'm going to throw India out there. Now, India's been struggling with a poor monsoon season.
Hmm.
However, if all of a sudden the rain started to come and they're like, we need phosphate, I think they buy one vessel and it shows the world demand's coming back. I'll bet you that next vessel probably comes back 5, 10, 15, $20 a ton higher. And you just start this stair step. One sale, price is higher. One sale, price is higher. And I
Is
think you see that around the world.
is that then, because I was going to ask you, you've been watching India's monsoon very closely. Why is that such an important wild card for the fertilizer market this year?
Because normally speaking, Indian fertilizer demand does not change. We always look at it from a perspective of, hey, prices are high, demand is down, or prices are low, demand is high. We move with the world market. We move with global pricing. That's how a normal S&D is supposed to work around the world. Indian farmers don't deal with that. The Indian farmer has their price set very low by the government. The government subsidizes that
Right.
price difference between the farmer and the world. And so they don't care. The price of phosphate, for example, could be $3,000.
But they'll pay the
Their price
same.
doesn't change. They'll pay the same.
Mhm.
So they don't care. The one thing that can really change the Indian fertilizer demand is that monsoon season. If they're not getting rainfall, if they are not wet enough, they don't plant the crop. They don't invest the money. They're no different than any other farmer around the world. And we saw a situation. It started off with the forecast saying monsoon's going to be poor because of the super El Nino. It started that way. They had a little bit of a period in the first part of July. The rains came in, things started to look improved, and everybody, especially as we were all at the Southwest Fertilizer Conference last week, people were saying things are looking good. The rains have come back. They've disappeared again. It's getting dry again, and all of a sudden the outlook isn't nearly as good as what it
Mm.
was. So that's the one thing that can devastate their demand. And when you talk about one of the biggest importers, one of the biggest buyers of major fertilizers around the world, their demand matters. A lot of the world's expecting phosphate purchase. A lot of the world is expecting urea purchases from India. If they don't need to, they're not going to pay the higher price. They'll just sit on their hands and wait for that rain to come if it ever does this year.
Yeah. Well, Josh, thank you again, as always, for all your wonderful insight and for joining us today. And thank you to our viewers for watching. For more financial content, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel.